Can I jump in and ask this question here? Because I think for the most part, because what I'm trying to get a glimpse of is your worldview, because that's really where the source of the solution is. And
I
I
think
think
I
you
made it
said,
clear.
no, 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 I know. Let me finish here, because you were saying pretty much allowing us to truly be our African selves without having to convert to anyone else's theology or a doctrine, whatever. Now, the interesting thing is, when it comes to being African, Africa is such a large continent. So even what it means to be African,
I can speak to that.
what does that look like? Because even on different sides of Africa, I mean, he just said that Ethiopia is literally a Christian nation. So what part of Africa are you describing when you say be African? What part of Africa do we need to actually emulate when we say we want to be African?
I never said that Ethiopia is a Christian nation, nor would I ever say it, because it would be a historical nomer. The word Christ is a Greek name, so we would have never used that terminology to describe our divinity. That's what's been placed upon us. Now, to answer your question, Africa has a common thread of two main characteristics, and that is ancestor veneration. Then there's also an oracular system that we use in our ability to channel, to reach our ancestors to act on our behalf. And that is the commonality throughout the top of Africa to the bottom of Africa prior to prior to European Arab invasion. And so that is what I'm saying is that we deserve, for our children's sake, how many more years can we go on believing in something that is waiting in the nebulous, waiting for us to come save us when we can't even remember? We can't even remember an attempt at liberation using our tools and technology to liberate us. And that's my worldview. African sovereignty to save us.
But
You know,
that's
it's
not
it,
actually a worldview. That's a essentially a hypothesis. You haven't articulated a worldview as in how you answer the questions: where we come from, where we're going, why are we here, what actually matters. You haven't answered. You haven't shown. All you have done is postulated, right?
He
And
asked me my worldview, my
hold
brother.
on, hold on, hold on, hold
But
on.
hold on, I was still in the I was the camera was still focused on me. You're telling me what you're telling me what I didn't say. He
Okay.
asked me a very singular question. You're asking me a more expanded question. So I would like for you, please, Damon, I'm gonna say this just straight up. I would like for you to quit speaking that way because the way that you're speaking, it insinuates that on this side is some hotep type business, and on this side is the intellectual, scholarly, and academic. You see, I speak to the soul of my people. I'm not trying to sound smart because the pellet aerosol pellet was invented by an educated man. The polar ice caps was not don't melt as a result of people who lack education. Education has not saved us either. So the type of intellect that you espouse has not liberated us either. But there is historical record, as I pointed out, what our brothers and sisters did in Haiti as an example that we can say, aha, maybe there's something more to our ancestral belief system, spiritual system, that if we build on it today, we might can move forward. What you see on the continent of Africa now, which probably has no concern of yours because you're so focused on academic and Europeanism. What
Now,
you're
Matt,
seeing
so hold on.
let's give Damon the
today,
opportunity to
You can ask.
respond to some of these things that you're
but
stating.
I'm gonna say it. He can. You. I know that he has to respond. But what you're seeing on the continent today, you see a movement throughout Africa where African people are decolonizing themselves from European power structures. And some of them are getting back to saying, hey, we need to also give them back their concepts of divinity. It's taking place today. But only in that way are we going to actually save ourselves from what the things that you're talking about.
So well,
Go
I'll
after
say
you,
this.
Damon. Jerome, you can go. I know you've been
Yeah.
in there waiting, Jerome. You can
But
go out right after Damon.
yeah. So I mean, the false dichotomy between being academic and this, it's what we're trying to ascertain is informed facts, right? So there's a method and an approach to doing that. That approach is not, ironically, it's not European, it's African. The way that I am approaching this conversation is African. Again, the problems in the things that you are saying are manifold. So, for instance, you're trying to get at a worldview that you never really articulated what your worldview is, because all you really want to do is really poke holes in Christianity. In reality, you're not being honest about that. The other thing is that you have ignored the fact that traditional African religion still exists in Africa, right? That is uniquely, indigenously, spiritually African, has never been colonized, has never been anything other than African. What you have not done is you have not shown how that has worked towards the liberation of African people, right? And so,
it wasn't the question, bro.
Hold on. The other part of that is this.
And you never answered any of my questions, by the way. Please.
Hold tight,
remember that.
Hold on,
Hold tight,
Malik. Hold
hold
on
tight.
1 second. Let's get it.
Those African traditional religions still exist in Africa, and what you have not connected the dots on is how they have worked towards the liberation of African people, not only having existed historically, but in contemporaneously. And so, for instance, let's just go back to the 16th century during the transatlantic slave trade. You have to ignore the fact that traditional African religion was being practiced by people who, in their worldview, found no problem selling Black Africans that looked like them to white colonizers. You have not connected the dots on the fact that, in spite of the existence of African traditional religion, in tribal infighting is a historical reality. In fact, even among those who indigenously practice African traditional religion or spirituality. So just because it's African, you haven't shown why it's better and how it liberates, because it certainly didn't liberate the Africans that they went into the interior regions of Africa and captured in order to sell to white Europeans. It didn't contribute to liberation. What it contributed to was their slavery. And so you are really imagining, you have a fiction about Africa and spirituality that doesn't exist anywhere in history or in the world. It doesn't even work. Bro. It doesn't even work today. And you are assuming this is another fallacy. So it's essentially the East-West fallacy. So you hear people talk about, oh man, that's a Western mindset. And the idea is, well, even if it's a Western mindset, what makes the Eastern mindset essentially better or right or more moral than the Western one? The reality is that you can find Eastern and Western contours of thinking and believing and practicing in spirituality throughout history everywhere in the world. But there's nothing superior about Eastern thinking over Western thinking, and yet there is nothing superior about Western thinking over Eastern thinking. You also make the assumption that our education is steeped in Western colonialism. That's essentially what every Hotep says when they get cornered by facts. The reality is that I have learned both from Eastern thought as well as Western thought. And the fact of the matter is that you'll find truths in both centers and you'll find falsehoods there. And at the end of the day, all you are really doing is attempting to poke holes in Christianity, but you have not propped up a salient argument about why your worldview is superior. In fact, you
That's
haven't
not the
even told us,
question,
hold
Brother
on, you
Damon.
haven't even told us what your worldview is. You keep saying you are.
That's not the subject matter. That's
No,
all.
no, it is because
No, no,
that's not only what,
it's
hold
kind of
on,
not fair
that's not
to
only what
say
I
that because
asked
that's
you,
not the question.
that
I would
is
have to
what,
take
hold
over the
on, sir,
conversation to
hold
do
on,
that.
sir. It is because it's not only what I asked you, it's what the host asked you. And you kept
I answered
saying
the host question.
you kept saying
I
you
pointed out
Hold,
Haiti.
hold tight, Malik. Hold tight. Hold tight.
you kept saying you were offering a worldview, but in effect, in terms of what worldview really means, you haven't done that. And so you're taking little bits and pieces of history. For instance, the Haitian Revolution. Well, the reality is that okay, that was wonderful. It literally led to the physical liberation of Haitian people under French rule. But historically, that also inspired many of the revolts here in this country during the time of slavery. And so the reality is that what you're
That's my point.
pointing to, we have an actual historical example of how that influence did inspire. And the interesting thing is that who it inspired? It inspired Christians to revolt. We literally have the narratives of formerly enslaved people and as well as the narratives of slaveholders. And from a documented standpoint, here is what slaveholders said: that the most problematic enslaved people on their plantation were Christians, because them reading the Bible and becoming Christians gave them dreams of liberation. It made them insubordinate. It made them run, and it made them see themselves as equal and as human and as equal to their white slaveholders. They
Who
said the
said that, Brother
people.
Damon? I just want to hear who said it.
And who and
I,
why did they
I'll
create
give
a
you,
law to outlaw the drum then?
yeah, I'll give you the quote.
Hold on. Let's let him struggle with
Yeah.
that for a minute. Say it again.
I literally have an entire.
And that's my point.
No,
And that's my
hold
point.
on. What do you mean
said
that's
you
your point?
quote, and now you're struggling.
No. I'm pulling it up on screen. I'm not talking off the top of my head. Thomas L. Johnson, 28 years a slave.
Who was that?
Thomas L. Johnson was a formerly enslaved person. Would you like for me to read what he
No,
said?
I just wanted to hear what you said. That's
Okay,
all.
no, I'm
I'm
quoting.
going to interrupt. I
This
just
is an
wanted to hear.
actual book in the Library of Congress. By the way, here's what he said. This is
This
what
part is not necessary, though.
Malik,
hold on,
let him
we
speak.
gotta, because
you
guys,
just asked for documentation. Okay, let me read this so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about when it comes down to this whole notion of whites being enslaved. So this is a formerly enslaved
Whites being enslaved.
African Christian by the name of Isaac Johnson, who wrote a book. It was published in 1901, but it predates his time in slavery. It's called Slavery Days in Old Kentucky. This is found on page 24 to 25. And I quote, he says this: "On this trip, Rosa accompanied the master, and his wife was left on the farm to attend the matters there. His wife was a devout Christian Catholic, and while master was gone, she used to gather the slaves remaining each morning in her dining room and teach them prayers, and some of the younger ones she taught to read. When the master returned in the spring and learned what she had been doing, he was very angry." Well, I wonder why. Here's why. He had always told his slaves that he was their Lord and master, and now informed them that his wife should not have told them of any other Lord. From Rosa, we learned that he lectured his wife for her conduct about the following: "If you teach them," these are the enslaved Africans, "to pray and read, they may think that they are human beings, and we will not be able to keep them as slaves. The more ignorant we keep them about such things, the better slaves they are. The worst slaves that we have are those who know the most. They are the ones that we have to punish and keep them down. We have here from 20 to 200 slaves each year, and if they should know as much as we do, where would we be? They would murder us in spite of the law. After this, my dear wife, we must never teach a Negro the Lord's Prayer or any other prayer." It goes on and on. And
Wow.
I can literally quote the actual statements of enslaved Africans practicing Christianity, showing that their slave masters didn't want them to learn to read the Bible, didn't want them to practice Christianity, and that those who did became the biggest problems on the plantation. That is why when we get to people like, for instance, Harriet Tubman, who was a born-again Christian, she took 13 trips down to the South and then back again to the North because she was motivated by what the Bible teaches about liberation. And so in the biblical worldview, we are not only taught that the Son makes us free indeed spiritually, but we are taught, because we are made in the image of God, that it is our God-given right to be physically liberated from bondage.
Yes,
and that is what motivated them. You still haven't given anybody that's practicing your worldview where it worked, how it worked. All you are doing is postulating and essentially hypothesizing. But where did it work? We just quoted history about how Christianity has liberated and contributed to the liberation of Black people.
Liberated us to what?
So there we go. So check it out here. I know, first of all, you went straight, you went Bishop Damon on that one. I heard it was something. I heard it in the voice. It was happening. So